Hi all, welcome to the Adaptavist DevOps Dilemma Solved Expert Hour Live. My name is Lily Holden and I'm a staff platform engineer here at Adaptavist. And today I'm joined by Peter Bojo, Ecosystem Solutions Architect at GitLab, and my fellow Adaptavist Sherry Yang, Engineering Manager at Venue SH, and Jason Spriggs, DevOps Consulting Team Lead at Adaptavist. So shall we have a quick round of introductions? Peter, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Lily. So yeah, my name is Peter Bojo. I'm an ecosystem solutions architect at GitLab. That's a very long title, but essentially what it means that I work with our partners like Adaptavist, and my job is to work with their pre-sales and technical pre- and post-sales teams, help them to understand our product, GitLab, and help them to help their customers to realize the value out of their investment in our product. And I'm Hungarian and I'm based in Vienna, Austria.
Yeah, lovely. Sherry?
Yeah, hello, I'm Sherry Yang. I'm the engineering manager for Venue.sh at the Adaptavist Group. This is a product that aims to simplify the DevOps experience for software development teams. And I'm super excited to share my insights about the potential DevOps dilemmas that we're going to talk about today, and that's being asked by our audience today. I'm based in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and it's been a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's great. So we're all over the world. I'm in Norwich, UK, and I think Jason, you're somewhere in the US.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I'm Jason Spriggs. I'm a DevOps consulting team lead over here at Adaptavist. I'm based in the Washington, D.C. area in the States. I focus mostly on customers in the DevOps space, and that's things like GitLab, AWS, anything beyond that, helping people migrate from one system to another or figure out how to use their tools most effectively. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, great. So we have a great team. Last time we touched on emerging DevOps trends for 2025. Have there been any developments or shifts that we should keep an eye on? What do we think?
I wasn't there. Throwing my hand up. I wasn't.
What's the scout?
I mean, in terms of shift, I would love to hear what Peter would have to say, because obviously I was the host at the previous live, and we hear from Jobin and oh dear, the other expert from Adaptavist. I'm sorry, I forgot his name. Hit me right away. But in terms of like what we were dabbling on last session is a lot about AI. So in terms of I would love to know like what that GitLab experience is like for AI.
I would say I fully agree. I mean, the biggest theme right now is for sure AI. For 2 years now, it all seems like a blur since the whole I would say hype, not just hype, but the whole trend has started with ChatGPT and all that. I would say for this year, the biggest focus, at least for GitLab, is definitely this agentic AI, what we call it. I mean, the feature itself is called workflows, right? And you can imagine it kind of like really this pair programmer kind of like experience, right? I would rather say, yeah, like a pair programming session where you can ask the AI bot essentially inside GitLab. It's called GitLab Duo. For a couple of tasks or give it a couple of tasks, it will come back to you with its ideas or proposals of what to do. You can have a back and forth, refine that plan, and then ask the AI to execute that. So like really imagine something like you have an issue or a backlog item about, I don't know, redesigning the home screen of your mobile application, and then you can ask GitLab Duo like, hey, can you help me with this? I need to redesign the screen to be like this and this and that. and then the bot can come back to you, or the AI can come back to you and say, okay, I think we should change this file this way, and then move this file here, and then do a replacing of this font and put this picture here. What do you think? Is it a good plan according to you? And then you can say, yeah, of course, let's go ahead, or do something back and forth. I would say that's the biggest change in the DevOps space, because up until now it was more like just chatting, giving text and getting text back, getting code suggestions. This is moving it more into this kind of like really like having an AI person, if you can say that, who you have a back and forth with, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you use the term pair programming. When I used AI in a similar way, it almost feels like you are maybe breaking down the tasks a bit, or breaking down the requirements, kind of talking to a junior developer, and they're prompting you, is this good enough? Is this kind of fulfilling what you were thinking about? So it's almost like a slightly different relationship than pair programming.
Right. Yeah. Good point. Yeah.
Coming out. Yeah. So it's really interesting to see how that develop. Will we always be there to make this human decision, saying, yeah, that's good enough, or will it be able to iterate on its own? Yeah.
Definitely. So yeah, from the GitLab side, that's what I see as a big trend that we will also chase.
I certainly would agree with that, and I think one of the the big things that we're seeing, not only in that space with having an opportunity to have those sort of pair programming sessions, or at least feedback sessions, and getting basically instantaneous responses, is also a lot of the AI offerings that are right now out there are getting a lot more smart about being specialized in particular areas. So things like Amazon Q are being trained specifically on not only AWS best practices, but like if you're trying to write CloudFormation or other very specific things that are tailored to a particular product offering, you really do get much better feedback, because it has access to know like how other customers are using their SDKs and things along those lines, where, if the developer is just like, I need an S3 bucket, it already knows what the best practices are for implementing those things, and is able to sort of figure out what the best way forward is for their customers. And I think that's one of the really neat things that's really come out in the last few months, compared to maybe, your in IDE experience that you were having previously. So I think that's really one of the better innovations recently.
No, absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head with this kind of like having wider and wider context, right? That's where the value really is, in my opinion. Like not just looking at a single file in your editor, but like, okay, it can reason about your infrastructure in AWS, right? So like, hey, have you noticed that you have this firewall misconfigured? Would you like me to fix it for you? So these kind of like interactions that are, of course, we are humanly capable of doing, but if you have been working with big enterprises with their huge infrastructure, there are many tools to tackle that kind of like complexity, but it's so difficult. And to have not somebody, but something, okay, that's a philosophical question, being in there, right? And then having this awareness of like the whole system, and you can have a proper conversation about it. So that's really the next step. I fully agree with you, Jason.
So it sounds like there is more like human monitoring being introduced in AI as part of your DevOps process, and I do agree, because that human, like we need to make sure that there are some sort of audit that is happening with the usage of AI. I mean, it is great that it can flag all the errors that perhaps is being introduced in the pipeline. At the same time, we need to make sure that we are adamant about checking with everything that we've used in terms of implementing AI and using AI introduced features. That person is really important. Perhaps it's a platform engineer or DevOps engineer. The responsibility there is high.
So do you see that shifting at some point? Will we kind of be removing that human touch or decision making, that final decision making at some point? Or do you kind of think that we will always need that?
I would say we as human will always be there as more of like a security gate. That like yes, we're using AI, robotics, automation to ease a lot of workflow, but that human touch is still needed in terms of validating the result and making sure that the process is being monitored and have someone on site to be there and make like to ensure like the pipeline is smooth. So in the future, I do see this collaboration, and I love the fact that like GitLab calls it dual, because it is this like interaction between automation and human, where we could help each other, help each other to make better decisions.
Yeah, I agree. Which kind of brings us to a bit more kind of philosophical maybe question there. What about any kind of bias that can happen with AI and automation? Because AI is all kind of taught on a certain set of data. What if that data somehow has secret biases in? I guess that is kind of one more reason why we would have a human verification at the end.
No, and I think that sort of leads into an interesting thing that I've kept in the back of my head, which is like, if an AI is trained off of certain models, or maybe has a predisposition to, say, introducing a particular library, it's like the easy way that I could see something being introduced. You know, that might have downstream implications where it's like, oh, okay, all of a sudden now you have to use a platform that might keep track of like licensing of that particular thing, or no, maybe it was trained off of a library that's been out of use and deprecated for 3, 5, whatever many years. And at least there, it might be predisposed to going down a particular route. So you need to have those checks and balances in place to keep track of that work. And similarly, like things like GitLab, where it'll yell at you in your pull request being like, stop, you are about to introduce something that's against company policy. It is a good place to also have some of those gates that will second check everything that's there.
Yeah, I think that's a very good perspective. It's like the fact that we have AI won't make our processes like really different. It will just speed them up, right? So you still need to go through a review process. You still need to pass all the tests, but it can go faster. It can happen faster, right? So a very good example, I was a software engineer before joining GitLab. CSS, I respect and fear CSS at the same time, right? Because it can be, it's really powerful. That's the good and the bad thing about CSS. And even to this day, when I have to do something on the front end for a hobby or something, or if I contribute to an open source project, I'm always like, oh my God, I hope I can avoid that, you know, because it can go wrong so quickly if you are not in the day-to-day, if it's not in your fingertips, so to say. And a couple of weeks ago, I had very, very good experiences. I actually tried multiple AI solutions, not just GitLab Duo. I was giving Claude a try. So I was like, okay, now I have a problem. Let's see how the different models work. And the biggest thing for me, again, somebody who knows how to do software development but doesn't do it on a daily basis, but this was this kind of like guidance that I got. And it, at the end of the day, I was the one reviewing the code and committing the code and submitting the patch into the project. But like the amount of time I needed to get to the point where I wanted to be, I was literally just explaining like, okay, I want a layout with 3 columns where the middle column is extending as much as possible. The left column is this wide and that wide. And it was giving me the CSS real time, and it was visualizing it. Okay, this is how it will look like. Do you like it? I'm like, okay, this is what I need. And I know that for me, that would have taken, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours easily, you know, and as soon as you resize the page, it all falls apart, and it didn't happen because it was very good quality code. And now I was really impressed. But again, the process didn't change at all. I just didn't have to spend time with looking at Stack Overflow, looking at MDM docs, and like looking for that specific magic incantation, which I know that exists, but I don't remember, what function to call and how. So yeah.
I think it's a great accelerator, isn't it? Yeah. Sorry, Sharon.
Yeah, and I think Peter brought up a really good point, is that when you're using a UI model, you should definitely try to use multiple UI models solving the same problem, so that you're removing your bias, because it's not just about you, it's actually about how the model is being trained. So you have all these different services in front of you. It's important that that you trial different kind of models to make sure that sort of like data that you're providing or you're creating, perhaps it's a feature in your tool, it needs to have a combined effort of that AI result. But that's part of like ethical AI that we need to focus in moving forward, because we really don't know what kind of data it's being trained on.
Yeah, I think that's quite an interesting intro into the question that comes from people that are watching, which is, what is the biggest hurdle when integrating AI tools into DevOps workflows? So, kind of, have you seen any of these problems?
I have a big one, or one that is coming up multiple times when I work with partners. So I am employed EMEA-wide, right? So I work with partners all over from Europe, Middle East, and Africa. But lately, I'm focusing mostly on partners in the Middle East. And as you might know, those countries have very strictly regulated, even stricter than the EU data policies internally in the countries. And obviously, they don't want to be left behind. Everybody wants to use the same set of tools that the rest of the world. But they have these very strict challenges about where can I put my data, who can access my data, whatever. So something that might work in the US or even in Europe, that's completely out of the question there if you are looking at a certain kind of industry or governmental agency, whatever, right? It doesn't really matter. There are these requirements. And then there are so few vendors on the market that offer this kind of like AI experience on premises, right? So completely on your own data center, completely on your own hardware. And we at GitLab are very, 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 very hard at work on this feature that customers will be able to bring their own AI models, which first and foremost help these customers, but also a little bit connects to what Sherry just said about bias and all that stuff, because then you will have the opportunity to train your own model, right? On your own data, you can verify the data that it has been trained on. But this is the bright side of the things. But the challenge, on the other hand, is that okay, I'm a customer of GitLab. I'm hosting GitLab, right? It's rather straightforward. It's very flexible. I just need a Linux machine, install it, more or less. That's it is. Now, if I need to host the AI models as well, that's like, okay, so now I need GPUs. Now I need to buy GPUs for my local data center. Now I need to figure out how to manage those as well. Now I need to be expert in installing and managing and updating and retraining those AI models, right? So like the complexity of your GitLab install is like skyrocketing, right? Which is needed still, because again, you don't want to be left behind. So you are going where you need to go, where the industry is going, but it's just complicating the situation so much more. So that's one of the challenges, or the biggest challenge that I am facing in the past 3 or 4 months since we've been trying to bring this feature into general availability in GitLab.
I think one of the other big things that I notice a lot is there's a lot of tools that are out there, and they're iterating so quickly, and that's great. But a lot of people, they might see a particular tool or a particular use case that doesn't have a direct integration with parts of their existing CI/CD system or things that are there. And then it becomes this sort of, either you do that internally or you wait for the vendor to like complete that integration, and that they might be a relatively small shop because they're a startup in the AI space. So I think that's one of those things also, is that trying to leverage the integrations where you can, or at least maybe quicker to iterate ways of building that into your pipeline where you're getting that feedback, and then not having to write this whole wrapper around everything, where you're then spending a ton of time writing an integration that in theory should either exist or you could piece together. There's a trade-off there, and I think it's important to sort of recognize that specific piece of the puzzle, because it's where people think, oh, it's really easy to do it, and then all of a sudden it's spent a ton of time doing something.
In terms of implementing like an actual AI feature within the product, I think like obviously Venue.sh right now is not considering adding AI into the complexity of the tool itself, but then at the same time we are aware what's happening in the AI ecosystem and trying to make sure that in the future we can serve that. But I have seen tools out there where they make AI as an opportunity and also optional. And I think especially when Peter mentioned there's no very limited on-prem options for AI, I think that's really important for product development to understand, is that there are companies who are having like really high guardrail around AI. So if there was an implementation into your product about AI, there has to be a lot of awareness being built up, and also the opportunity to make it optional as a feature where you could say toggle on and off.
Yeah, and just connected to that, I think it's also very important what you briefly mentioned, Sherry, that you don't want to put AI features into your product just for the sake of them being there, right? Because then it's just, what is the value for the customer, right? Somebody have to pay the price of that feature being there, of the infrastructure being consumed by those AI models. So somebody who is developing a product needs to be very conscious about like, okay, what is the actual value I can bring to my customers by introducing something new, and then having the option to opt in and opt out. That's also very important. But just this like slapping AI on everything, it's not necessarily making the problem go away, right? It might actually complicate stuff just even more. But when you can find those, sometimes just a couple of interactions in the product, it can really go a really, really long way if you can narrow it down, and implement something just for that particular thing. Yeah,
absolutely. What do we think about AI-driven security tools? Can they keep with the evolving threats, or do they create a false sense of security? Because obviously they might be trained on the old data, and the new AIs might be inventing new security threats. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation.
Yeah, it's a bit of like cat and mouse game, right? I had the discussion with a friend. He's a security architect at one of our partners, and he said that I'm really looking forward to the point in time where I have an AI agent or an AI committing stuff into my repository, and then another one reviewing that AI's output, seeing if it has any security vulnerabilities and bugs, and then I'm just sitting there and just see it all play out. It will go on forever, right? So
no, when I was playing around with Amazon Code Guru, which is based off the Q models, and what was really neat about it is that I gave it some personal projects that I was working on, just the repository access. And it was like, well, you're doing it this way, and the manufacturer, or well, the people that write the library now suggest that you do it this way. And I was like, I didn't know this, because I just kept upgrading the dependencies over the last 3 years, just so it kept working and was up to date and secure according to the release notes. But at least for me, I don't scan those things wholeheartedly. And it was nice that it was able to point out like, oh no, based off of the release notes, they actually introduced this new thing and you should do it this way. And it was able to spit out an output right there. And that was really nice. So I think we're certainly getting further in that space as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. When you just update the dependency, you're not going to rewrite the whole code base every time. Yeah. So there's like an interesting question from Ahmed. How do you keep track of all the technologies that have been improved so quickly and so fast and quickly, basically. I guess there's so much going on. Yeah, not easy at all.
I am very glad that my Apple News has gotten very good at telling me what things I should keep on top of, because there are so many innovations out in the space right now. I think it's a bit haphazard in the way, at least, that I do things. I don't know about y'all.
In the development lifecycle, it's really tricky because you may be solutioning a feature in a specific version, and then while you're working on maybe using new technology, new framework, and for example, if you're working on AI, if there are changes right away, you need to ingest those information as you go, as part of your solutioning process. We have that a little bit. We have that sort of challenge in Venue as well, working with like Backstage and their development process and their improvement process as well. As part of that ecosystem, we want to make sure that we're bringing the latest technology to the product solution itself, and at the same time trying to make sure we're catching up with all the new feature that is being introduced in the space. It is chasing a little bit of the impossible, but I think as developers, this is what you do on a daily. You make sure you're staying up to date with the trend, and then you're making sure that there are security awareness being introduced to your team to make sure, like, oh, are we aware that this is happening, and should we make sure that the feature has coverage for the specific security.
Yeah. We have a new question for Mahmoud. Would it be a problem if hackers used it too? I'm assuming Mahmoud thinks about AI. And yeah, I guess hackers are using AI. There's no distinction there.
I would say one of the big things that I've seen as sort of a downstream result of AI tools being out there is that, at least at the very beginning, it was really easy for people to just be like, I want to use this API, and it would generate a response which included someone's API key that it was happened to be trained on for like a service. So it'd be like, I want to use this geospatial API, which is generally, those tend to be fairly expensive. So if all of a sudden one of the tools that's out there starts spitting out responses that has your company's API key, that can be a very expensive thing. So that's one way that you could say that hackers, not so much, but that could also be a way that you accidentally disclose information that maybe was proprietary over to another company because you just copy and paste something out of a GPT window or something. So yeah.
No, and I think that's a very important point, that again, it's 2 years roughly, right, since we have these AI tools. I lost my sense of time since the pandemic. I'm serious. So, but in these 2 years, at the beginning, it was really like that, as Jason just described, this kind of like Wild West. Everybody was just like using any kind of, not just ChatGPT, but any kind of AI you might find on the internet, accidentally pasting in sensitive data, right? And lately, in the past couple of months or half a year or 1 year, I finally started to see like companies moving in this direction of like, okay, keeping everything compliant, making it transparent what the AI is doing, how is it thinking, showing the sources, like, okay, I'm getting this information from this exact place. And it just show so much how young sort of this part of the industry still is, right? So we are still not just GitLab, but like everybody in IT is just like figuring out how to do it like properly and responsively and securely. So I'm sure that still a long way to go, and actually a lot of opportunity for new companies to come up with innovative solutions that can help other companies to regulate their own use of AI, right? So I'm not even thinking about like what you put in front of your customers. It's like internally, like Jason said, accidentally putting company data into an AI bot that gets trained on it and then spits it out to your biggest competitor, for example. So yeah.
And I would say we cannot forget about the traditional ways of work as part of this DevOps pipeline, right? Like you have monitoring system in place. You're making sure like there are gateways to make like log all the traffics and activities. So even if there's a bad intention hacker being in the process, we still have best practice in place for DevOps, and it's being tracked in that pipeline. If your AI system is learning from these like bad activities and alerting you accordingly, that's a great thing, because then they can learn that, oh, this is possible. We've never seen this before, but this is possible. So
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
good and bad.
Yeah, it's a constant catch up, but security was always like that, right? So again, it didn't change. AI didn't change the nature of it. It's just like speeding up. The iterations are shorter, right? But it was always kind of like that, right? Hackers came up with a new and innovative way of breaking into a system. Okay, then we came up with a new tool that could detect these kind of attacks, and now we are just speeding up the iteration at the end of the day. Yeah.
Very true. We're using hackers to train AI now, so it's good. We have a question from Praveen. How do you assess the risk of exposing sensitive data while using AI-powered features such as ChatGPT 4.0, Copilot, and others in day-to-day engineering development, given that we lack control over the data being stored? So I guess it all depends on a contract you have with the AI providers, and some of them do guarantee that they won't be using your data for training.
Exactly. No, that's exactly, for example, how GitLab does it, right? So for us, the way GitLab works, that the feature that I mentioned called GitLab Duo, we have it a blank name, but since I'm talking to a more technical audience here, I can be a bit more in depth. So under the hood, the way it works is that so we have multiple features under the umbrella of GitLab Duo, and each of these features, our engineering team is constantly evaluating different AI models and picking as we discussed this already, picking the right one for the right use case, right? So let's say we have a chatbot in GitLab that's powered by a certain AI. And then we have another AI that can give you security recommendations, like you might have this misconfiguration in your YAML files, whatever. That's another AI. Exactly as Sherry said, you have to try multiple models and see what works the best for the given use case. That's what we are doing as well. But we are always picking the models in a way that's the baseline for us, that none of the providers that we are working with are training their models on the data that we send them, right? Of course, it narrows down the set of models that we can use in GitLab, but from the point of view of the customer, if they buy from us, buy our AI features, they can just tick that checkbox saying that, okay, GitLab is taking care of that for me. They take the responsibility of vetting their vendors down the supply chain, and they make sure that my data will be transferred to these vendors, because technically we need to transfer it to get the response back, right? But we have these kind of contracts, as Lily mentioned, that make it possible for us to guarantee for the customer that their data is not being ingested and accidentally being given back to another customer, like Jason gave that example a couple of minutes ago. So I would say that's the only way. I mean, you have to be really careful about what are the vendors that you are working with, reading the small font in the in the contract.
I think there's a saying that I can't quite remember exactly where it is. If you aren't paying for a product, you are the product. And that is always a good thing to keep in mind, especially on this, where expect if you are not paying for something that you are giving something as a result. So that's certainly something to keep in mind, and probably a general rule of thumb there. I think also one of the things for exposing sensitive data specifically is that sort of helps you maybe. The question is good, and I think it helps spark some downstream innovation where maybe I think about 10 years ago, there was a big thing called a 12-factor app where it's like, don't store your secrets in your repository. And like, it was like the founding principles of containerization, but things like don't have secrets in your repo. It's like one of the big things, and store them in environment variables, etc. And you would want to maybe, once you've implemented these things, then you would go downstream and enable the features of AI on the repositories that have met this criteria for, okay, we're not doing basic stuff that's like bad. And that helps reduce your attack surface there to then only exfiltrate any sort of data that you would want to, and then you keep the sensitive stuff out of your AI boundary. So that's something certainly to keep in mind as well.
It was really clear from our CTO, John Moore, to bring the AI culture into the organization, into the Adaptavist group. When he says, yes, you can use AI, you can use ChatGPT, you can use Copilot, John at the time built a team to make sure that we have our own instance, and we have that awareness that our data will be trained. But if we do run our instance, there could be some guidelines there or protections there. So even though with that we own our instance, or we have a private account with these different models and services, we still made it clear to the John still made it clear to the entire organization, like, still don't copy and paste your chunk of code into these bots, because we cannot guarantee that they are not going to use the data that's provided as training material. So as part of that culture and organization, awareness is really important when it comes to using AI.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because the interface now is just a web GUI, so it is much harder to police. We need to all have that awareness. So moving a bit more back to DevOps, and thinking about cultural and organizational issues around that. In your opinion, how can companies foster a culture that supports DevOps principles and collaboration between development and operational teams? And what strategies can be employed to break down silos between these teams?
So Venu's goal is to solve that problem of breaking down silos. And before we even start the conversation of like building a product to help with that process with silos, it's really like you utilize your over communicating skill. I say, even though we are working on our own parts of the system, and DevOps engineers and platform engineers and developers, we are all working on what is matter at the moment for us. But it is also very important to build awareness with each other's work, right? So whether it is you're using a tool to aggregate these data, it is still important to host like regular summits, have a common forum to have a conversation about each other's approach. And what is the latest practice that is being practiced within the company or within the team or within a specific area of the company. I think that sort of awareness is important.
I think that really goes to the value that having a development platform is like critical for, is not only understanding how different teams are interconnected, but also giving you a space to be able to make those announcements and be like, we're working on these things and this is how it might impact you. Or, at least being able to see those various pieces of the event stream of what else is going on around you, so you're able to react appropriately. And if you want to filter that out, that's fine. But having that information available, I think, is a critical piece to being able to have those conversations in the first place.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I have a very like tricky and sensitive like filter for the right amount of information I want to get from GitLab. Because right now I'm getting every single commit, merge, like MRs request or even MR processes through emails. But how do you, as someone who wants these information, to make sure that these are not over communicating or just enough information? But at least I know if I subscribe to all, I am aware what's happening or how frequent the actions is happening. So it's up to the person to make sure that, I think, to Jason's points, up to you to like make sure that you subscribe to the information that you need.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Jason was touching a bit on the internal development platform, which is kind of one of the products that is coming with platform engineering. So what do we think about the move to platform engineering? Is it kind of the next stage of DevOps? And should organizations shift their focus to platform engineering? And also, do we think that platform engineering reduces the cognitive load of developers, or does it create just unnecessary abstraction layers?
It depends on how is it implemented, right? It's always boils down to that. I mean, you can do agile development in a way that it will speed up the delivery, and you can do it in a way that it will slow it down, right? On paper, we are following agile best practices in both cases. I've worked in both kind of teams, but you are using the tool in a way that it can harm your productivity instead of help it. So I think it's the same with platform engineering, same with DevOps. It all boils down to finding what the team actually needs, right? What unblocks them and what is just hindering productivity at the end of the day. And that might be, in case of Agile, a daily stand-up can be incredibly useful if you are doing in a way that thoughts are being shared, feedback is being given, or it can be just, okay, we stand up for 10 minutes each morning. That's it. Maybe I won't get a heart attack as soon as I wouldn't be doing it, but that's pretty much the only benefit I get out of it, right? We are doing the ritual, but we are not doing it for the right purpose. The same can be applied to DevOps and platform engineering, I believe.
Yeah, and perhaps it's a continuation of a previous question about silos. It's like when you have access to platform engineering, and if you have access to DevOps engineers, like, you do need to assess, like, how can we make this teamwork more efficient? It does complicate things. And like, how do you utilize all these resources correctly? I think that's a key thing to evaluate when you bring that into a team culture. So much like if you were to bring that into IDP, like into an actual awareness system, and you see opportunities where, like, platform engineering team can come in and say, oh, I see that this specific team is doing a same pattern as, team A is doing same pattern as team B. Let's try to abstract that. But you need to have that conversation first to find commonality, to make sure that is needed, instead of working it on your own in terms of, like, realizing that pattern. Perhaps there's a reason why they're doing it separately.
Yeah, and I think there's a reason why there is emergence of DevEx, developer experience teams, because sometimes platform engineering teams or DevOps teams can be like deep down into the infrastructure, deep down into certain processes and streams, and they don't really see how are those artifacts being used by the engineers in other teams. And then there's that kind of nice bridge with developer experience in between.
And then it all comes back to the problem of silos, the lack of transparency, the lack of communication, right? At the end of the day, it boils down to that. It's like, okay, what am I working on? Who is the customer? That might be an internal customer, right? The developers might be the customer, but you need to be really aware of not just the what am I doing, but like, why am I doing it? And so what's like the higher goal, so to say, of my job? Because I can automate everything, fine, but as Sherry said, did it needed any automation in the first place?
Yeah. So is there such thing as over automating then?
I'm sure there is. Yeah. premature optimization, right? That's
Yeah.
I have a friend who works at a local company, and he said like he's a very senior developer on an application, and he said, and that really stuck with me, like I adopted this approach in my interaction with customers, that train before developing, right? So before I commit my team to developing a feature, let's see if the customer is okay with training their people to work in a way that might actually in the short term or even in the long term makes the need for that feature go away, actually, right? So validate first if the customer really needs it before okay, it's 3 clicks now, maybe we can move it down to just 1 click. Are they really using it? Do they really care? Maybe it's 1 person per week clicking on the 3 buttons and they don't mind at all clicking those 3 buttons. Maybe you can just put it in the documentation. Hey, if you want to reach this menu, go to these 3 buttons. That's it. End of the story. Instead of committing, 2 weeks of development work to overhaul that part of the UI, right? So it's all about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I thought maybe we could switch a bit and talk a bit about remote and hybrid work, because there is like the whole return to the office. There are lots of remote teams. We are all working remotely. So what do we think? How has the shift to this remote and hybrid working environments affected DevOps practices?
I think one of the big things that I've seen, not only working here for a global company, is that a lot of our customers have sort of instituted a lot of those checks and balances in their processes and made it a lot more clear, where previously you might, like, let's say it's a Thursday night release that you guys would all do. And it would be after hours, everyone would hang out in the office, order some pizza, and then do a release there, and you could like shout across the office if something was going on that another team needed to be aware of during release. And I think COVID, the pandemic, just sort of the whole culture there really started making people think a little bit more about like, all right, yeah, we could all hop on a Zoom call and do that exact same process, but at the same time, like, what are those things that are breaking? That are going on. And I think that sort of really has helped drive the adoption of DevOps, because it made people really think about what are our processes, how tightly knit are they? Are we doing it because it was for the sake of getting stuff quickly out the door, or were there unnecessary complications that were being introduced because of that process? So.
There's also an evolution of like that cloud migration process, right? Like I know cloud was introduced many years ago, but like there's like that spike of like integrating and migrating to cloud, and that's important for DevOps, right? Like now you're talking about cloud infrastructure. Now you're talking about having all these pipelines that is directly connected to a cloud infrastructure. So in terms of like introducing that remote hybrid work, you are also revisiting your DevOps infrastructure.
No, definitely. And I mean, I haven't experienced the shift itself because I've been working remotely, 12 years now, essentially. And GitLab is a remote first company. So we are, since the beginning now, we are almost 3,000 employees. We don't have any offices anywhere ever. And I would say that the biggest benefit of working this way for me personally, but that's what I see at GitLab as well, is the added productivity. And it's not because of what most people think when I tell them that I'm working remotely, like, oh, okay, then you can just get off your phone and turn off all the emails and just focus on your work. There's that part. Obviously, it's easier to do deep work in this 4 square meter room than in an open office, right? But at the same, but for me, what is really, and I really started to appreciate that at GitLab, because previously in my previous jobs it was always mixed. There were people in office, I was usually working remotely, usually from another country, right? So I didn't even have the opportunity to be on site. And at GitLab, it works so well at such a high scale because we are documenting everything and we are async first. So I rather call it async first, not remote first, because the goal is to have everything written down that we discuss and then we agree on, and have everything recorded, have, coming back to the AI topic, have AI summaries enabled for everything. So it doesn't really matter in which time zone you are working. You can collaborate and contribute. So I have a team member who is actually based in Australia. I mean, I talked to him. Unfortunately, I really like you, Summer, if you are watching. Unfortunately, we talk maybe once per month, right? Because our time zones just don't match. Basically, he has to stay up until midnight and I have to wake up early in the morning so we can have a half an hour chat. But we still collaborate very, very effectively and productively because he documents everything he's working on. I document everything. All the meetings are recorded. So I don't, yes, there's a distance in terms of like not having face-to-face communication, but I feel like we are working in the same team still, because everything is this, again, not remote, but more async first. So yeah, I think that's the benefit of this shift, at least for me.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. I think I've been enjoying work more since I went fully remote. What are the tools and strategies that you recommend for maintaining that remote work active and engaging?
I think it's important to set on like an actual communication platform. Like you can use different tools, but then it's important to let your team know, every single member know, like these are the communication tools that we're going to use. Whether it is like Confluent, like we're going to do documentation on Confluence, we're going to do regular development chat in Slack, and conference call over Zoom. These rules needs to be in place for your team and very clear, so that they know, oh, if I need to do like a UX check, UX review, I will have to watch a Loom video, like things like that. Like everyone knows what are the tools involved. Obviously, there's so many options, and that's why it needs to be documented to make sure that everyone on the team knows what to go to.
Yeah, definitely. So speaking about communication, I just wanted to remind everyone we have less than 10 minutes left. So if anyone has any comments or questions, please write them in the comment section and we'll try to answer them.
Yeah, there's actually a very good comment from Praveen. I'm just checking that in this remote, as I talked about this colleague of mine in Australia, it can be, as you can see on the screen, it can be really difficult to maintain this active engagement. And I think you need to be intentional about that. And I discussed this topic just recently with my girlfriend, and she had she's not working in IT, not even near, but she had a very good insight, like, and she was saying the same essentially, like, I believe you really need to be very intentional about it, because she's, for example, struggling with even keeping up with people in her personal life online, right? So like these chat platforms are awesome, but they are kind of like impersonal. You are sending pictures and short messages, but it's not the same as calling somebody on the phone, and it's the same in a work environment. So again, this calling of my Samer, otherwise we would never talk, but we are very intentional about, like, okay, we have 1 day per month. Okay, I wake up earlier, you go to bed later, and we just have this little bit of a chat to make sure that we still remember that, okay, there's a human being on the other side of that Google Doc or GitLab issue or Slack channel or whatever you have, right? So you need to be conscious and intentional about having these times for which would happen, naturally in an office. You just bump into people, you have a coffee together, whatever. Now you have to, like, okay, let me put a blocker in your calendar.
Yeah, I agree. I think that intentional is really important. You need to find time just to talk about anything, personal stuff. Otherwise, we become too transactional. It's not.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah. And we are just AI bots at the end of the day, right? Just then we can be replaced by AI. Just joking.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, let's not do that. Yeah, so I don't know if there's anything else you guys would want to cover in the last few minutes.
I do find like Praveen's comment really good as a point for us to wrap up. It's like, yes, we're all working remotely. Yes, we have all these like complicated team structure now as we move forward with DevOps engineers and platform engineers and perhaps focusing on developer experience as part of this like DevOps ecosystem. We need to make sure that mental health there is still important, and intentional, it's just like Peter said, intentional like conversation is needed, and you're keeping each other motivated. There was a role being coined many years ago about the role of glue, right? You need to be aware of each other's situation and make intention conversation to make sure that things are happening in between the gaps. Everyone is busy. We should all assume that everyone's busy, but when you have time to get together, we're not wasting each other's time. It's meaningful. And I also agree the fact that like we're more productive in the world of remote because we can be hyper focused without distraction very easily. And at the same time, like, do I really care about these water cooler chat? Real physical water cooler chat? I do miss the environment where Jason mentioned, like on the release day, you can shout across the room and say, "We need this fixed now."
Those are missed too.
That.
Yeah.
I know. I miss that. I miss that. The fact that like you can do that. But definitely just bringing that awareness to people. Like when we are working remotely, we're fully focused in what we need to do, and there's no chit chatting. Very limited time for chit chatting.
Amazing. Thank you, Sherry. That was, I think, a perfect ending to our little chat. Thank you all. I think I really enjoyed this, and I'll probably speak to you next time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lily.
Thank you. We should do this again. See you.
See you. Bye.